the BankTalk podcast, the show where we talk to leaders and experts from the community banking sector. Whether you are a current CEO or aspire to be one, this podcast will give you valuable insights and advice on how to run your financial institution better. Each episode features a different topic and a guest who shares their experience and knowledge with us. Tune in and learn something new with BankTalk podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Bank Talk. I'm Charlie Kelly, your host and partner at Remedy Consulting. Today on Bank Talk, we're going to talk to Kevin Pernick. I met Kevin at a Bankers Association conference, and he had done an interesting study on leadership and just some qualities of leadership that are kind of important to running your community bank. So I thought it would be an interesting conversation to have on the Bank Talk podcast. If you give me just a minute, we'll join Kevin. Okay, welcome back to Bank Talk. I have with me Kevin Pernick. Kevin is the president and CEO of Bank Plus in Iowa. Kevin, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
So, Kevin, I caught a piece of conversation across a table at a bankers event, and I said, hey, I think that would make an interesting podcast. It revolves around a leadership study that you had done. And I thought if you could, maybe just give us a little bit of background, lead me up to where the study came from.
Sure. I have been at Bank Plus for almost 20 years now, and I spent the first 15 or so years as the chief financial officer of the bank. And one day I was sitting around the table with my daughter, and my daughter said, Dad, why do I have to go to college if you didn't go to college and you're the CFO of a bank? And I said, well, I appreciate that. You need to go to college. And I got me thinking about going back to school. So I spent some time going back and getting a few degrees, getting my associates, my bachelor's degree in banking and finance. And I thought, like any good banker, I should probably get my MBA. And I looked in our organization and I saw that there were some leadership challenges. And I could see from my position as the CFO how that was affecting not only the people in the organization, but it was also affecting our bottom line. And I thought, there has to be some research out there that explains, as a new leader coming in and taking over, because I knew I was in the succession plan to take over the bank. I knew that there had to be some research out there that would explain what kind of leadership style I should use to help our organization go from a traumatized state to a state of healing, and maybe see if I can fix both the problems of what our people are going through, as well as the lack of income that we were making at the time. So I went on and was searching for research through my master's degree, and the research I was looking for wasn't there. And what I was specifically looking for is how do I do this? What's something that's tested? What have other people gone through? How do I get to a point where I can influence our organization in the most productive way possible? And what I found is the research wasn't there. So I figured it was my duty to create it. So I went on to Creighton University in Omaha and studied a little further. And as part of my doctoral dissertation, I produced this research that was looking specifically at what leadership styles are necessary for organizational healing to occur, and what of the different leadership styles, what do I need to do to be there to help my people and to move through to the state of healing that we so desperately need.
Right. So tell me about the study itself, the study that you put together. First of all, maybe let's start with, how did you set it up?
Sure. The dissertation and practice model that Creighton uses is pretty concrete. So we go through various stages to set up this study. And I was very specific on what I was looking for. And my research question ended up being, to what extent does leadership style predict organizational healing in Iowa financial institutions following the COVID-19 pandemic? And so that was kind of the overall umbrella that set up the rest of the study. To be able to do that, I had to develop some hypotheses. A statistically significant relationship exists between a CEO's leadership style and profitability following organizational trauma. That was my first hypothesis. The second was, a statistically significant relationship exists between a CEO's leadership style and asset growth following organizational trauma. And the third was a statistically significant relationship exists between a CEO's leadership style and organizational trust following organizational trauma. So I looked at three different variables: profitability, asset growth, and trust.
And trauma in that scenario, trauma would be the pandemic?
So the definition that I used for trauma was quite specific, and it came out of the research. Definition of trauma is an event or a collection of events that exceeds the emotional capacity of an individual or of the group as a whole.
Okay. So in that scenario, trauma could also be change in leadership. It could be,
Mergers
financial
and
crisis.
acquisitions,
Yeah. Okay. Oh, merger acquisition. That's a great one. Yep. Okay.
a toxic leader.
Okay.
There are a lot of examples of things that could exceed the emotional capacity of the individual or the collective.
Okay. But in this scenario, oddly, you had a sample of a bunch of organizations that went through a nationwide, or I guess a global trauma, right?
Yeah, the global pandemic provided a traumatic event that we could all relate to. We put it up to every bank in the state. Now, I did focus it specifically on the state of Iowa.
Okay.
And with the help of the Iowa Bankers Association, I was able to reach out to all 267 CEOs in the state at the time.
Wow. That's an excellent sample group. So let me ask you this. You had talked about leadership style. Are there specific leadership styles within the survey, or how do you think of leadership style itself? Just those words.
That's a great question. There are a lot of leadership styles out there. Every day there's somebody else coining a new leadership style and writing a book about it. Specifically for this research, I used the multi-factor leadership questionnaire, and that breaks down leadership into three specific styles that are kind of umbrellas for a lot of the different styles that are talked about today in popular media and books, stuff like that. The three specific styles that I was looking at were transformational, transactional, and passive avoidant. So a transformational leader would be your charismatic, vision sharing leader. Your transactional leader is what we would consider your manager. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. If you do your job well, I'll give you a raise. There's that transactional relationship. And the passive avoidant leader is the leader that's just not present at all. The leader that spends more time on the golf course than in the office. It's your problem, you fix it, but I'll take the credit when things go right, that type.
Okay. And I think that fits, whether you call it Iowa bankers or anybody's bankers. I think, though, that's a pretty good breakdown without going into, 9 iterations of what a leadership style is. I think those are pretty good classifications. Okay. So tell me about the survey results, how it went out and what you got back.
We'll be right back.
Is your technology spend getting a little out of hand? Are you worried about making those big strategic moves because of those hefty vendor contracts? Or maybe you just feel like your technology is currently holding you back. In today's banking world, overspending on technology is a risk you just can't take. Going up against those major vendors on your own can be tough, expensive, and especially when the contracts are designed to benefit them. That's where Remedy can come in. Remedy Consulting helps our clients stay competitive and grow their business with the right technology, products, and their spending strategies. Not a Remedy client yet? Head on over to remedyconsult.net for a free review of your tech stack, spending, and contract terms. Even if you're not the perfect fit, you'll walk away with expert advice and confidence in your technology decisions. Check us out at remedyconsult.net or give us a call at 262-955-7776. Thanks for tuning in, and now let's get back to the episode.
Sure. So I sent out an email, again, with the help of the Iowa Bankers Association, sent it out to all of the CFOs in the state of Iowa. In that email was a Survey Genius link. So they would go out to, the respondent would go out to the survey. The MLQ, that multi-factor leadership questionnaire that I used, has 45 questions, but they're very easy to answer. It's a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is not at all and 5 is frequently, if not always. And it asks the rater some example questions. The person I'm rating seeks different perspectives when solving problems, and they would pick 1 to 5. Conversely, they would also ask them, the person I'm rating waits for things to go wrong before they take action, and then they would select the option there. So there's 45 questions like that. And then there were 12 questions from the organizational trust inventory, or the OTI. And those were a 1 to 7 scale, where 1 is strongly disagree, 7 is strongly agree, and some example questions there. The staff think that people in management tell the truth in negotiations, 1 to 7. The staff feels that management takes advantage of people who are vulnerable, again, 1 to 7. So of those 57 questions, the estimated time was about 15 minutes to be able to run through those.
Okay.
So then we only added 2 other questions. One of them was for the FDIC certificate number. And the second question was whether they felt that in their organization, the COVID-19 pandemic met the definition that I provided of trauma, that it exceeded the ability of the individual or the organization to cope.
Okay. So tell me about the FDIC number. Why was that important?
Sure, that was really important because I took the survey information and then I matched that up with call report data so we can look specifically at growth and profitability. Once that data was merged in the statistics program that I was using, I then stripped the FDIC certificate number out of everything. So I actually went into the survey responses and removed the certificate number to protect the people who were kind enough to provide me with their thoughts.
Make sure they didn't get fired.
They were nice enough to tell me. The last thing I wanted was for somebody to get in trouble for telling me the truth.
Yeah. Okay. So it was more or less to make the data anonymous per se.
Yep, and anonymous.
Okay. So tell me what you learned. You had sort of 3 leadership types, and your hypothesis was, does one of those leadership styles get to profitability, asset growth, or organizational trust? Are they predictive? And now you can correct me because I'm sure I said that wrong.
Or you were really close.
Okay.
So that's what I was looking for, is what is the relationship between the leadership style and each of those 3 variables, again, being profitability, growth, and organizational trust. And I used a regression analysis, which is a statistical tool that we can use to look at not just correlation. I didn't want to know whether they were connected. I wanted to know if one predicted the other. And the regression gives us predictability, that this variable predicts the outcome of another variable. And what I found was a little surprising. What I found was that during the pandemic, there was not a statistically significant relationship between leadership styles and profitability directly, but there was a very significant relationship between leadership styles and trust. So why does that matter? I mean, obviously leadership styles and trust, that makes sense that those 2 would be connected, but I expected to see a little bit more on profitability and growth. Some of the noise could have been from the pandemic, from all the money that was pumped into the system, the PPP loans that produced a lot of income. There was quite a bit of noise in there. But when I dug in a little further, what I found is that trust is a significant predictor of profitability. So the leader influences trust influences profitability in the organization.
If the leader does not affect profitability directly, but affects trust, which affects profitability, does that mean there's a lag?
The technical term for it is that trust is the mediator in the relationship.
Okay.
And so based on my research, following an organizational trauma, the leader's focus should be on building trust in the organization. And the byproduct of that trust building is increased profitability.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about which leadership style most affects organizational trust.
Sure. So again, the 3 leadership styles that we looked at were transformational, transactional, and passive avoidant. Transformational leadership significantly impacted trust, like to the point that an increase of 1 point in the transformational leadership score was predictive of an increase of 0.5 point in the trust score. So it's a significant relationship. Transactional leadership is also predictive of an increase in trust. And it makes sense when you think about it. A transactional a transactional relationship, again, is if you do this, I'll give you this bonus or this raise. And when that happens, management is proving that they're trustworthy because you did what you needed to do, management did what they needed to do, and they gave you the bonus or the raise or whatever it was. It wasn't quite as high of an increase as transformational leadership. It was 0.394 instead of 0.504, but that relationship still exists. Now, conversely, a passive avoidant leadership style has a negative effect on trust. So a 1 point increase in passive avoidance score predicted a 0.49 decrease in the trust score. So there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of numbers there. But transformational leadership had the highest impact, positive impact on the trust score. Transactional had a positive impact on trust score. And then passive avoidant had a significant negative impact on the trust.
So if I'm a transformational leadership that only shows up, well, let's say 2.5 days out of 5, right? If transformational leadership and passive avoidance have the same correlation, right? Roughly, in reverse, I think, if I understood that. Right. If I'm really dynamic, but I show up half of the week, I would think trust would stay exactly the same. And I know there's no way that ever happens, but
I don't think you're too far off. In each of us, as the way this survey scores, there's a little bit of each in all of us, or at least a part of it. We're rated, the way that it actually comes all together is you get a score for transformational, you get a score for transactional, and you get a score for passive avoidance. And so if you were that leader, actually, I think it would put you in a great position to increase your trust by showing up. Now, it doesn't mean that if the leader is not in the office 5 days a week, they're not effective. That's not at all what I'm saying. Passive avoidant has a lot more to do with it's your problem, you deal with it, and I'll just take the credit for it.
Yeah. Or just can never find the person or won't make a decision or those types of things, probably.
Right. And I do know a lot of business gets done on the golf course. So being on the golf course isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you're away from the office 4 days a week and only there one, and that 1 day a week, you're not connected to anything. You're not making any decisions, but you show up at the board meeting, take all the credit for everything. That's a pretty good description of a passive avoidant.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that's good. That's perfect, actually. So, Kevin, what did you learn personally? I think the goal of the podcast at any point is probably to say, all right, let's get to the punchline, right? And in my head, I would say, you as a burgeoning leader at that point, right, had kind of a desire as to why to do this survey. But what do you think the overall is for somebody who wants to take controls, or maybe somebody who wants to just change their leadership style, right? What do you think? Is there a punchline here?
There is. What I came out of this was I was looking at what do I need to do? What do I need to be? And I think what I found is what's more important is how do the employees feel? And I don't mean that in necessarily a touchy-feely way, but what I found is the results of the organizational trust inventory were really the key. And so on a 12-question survey, what I've come away with seeing is that's an open book test for increasing not only trust in your organization, profitability. So I can look at those 12 questions and say, how do I increase the answers to these 12 questions? How do I make sure that my people know that I'm telling the truth when I'm negotiating? How do I make sure that my people know that I'm not going to take advantage of people who are vulnerable? And how do I use my leadership style? How do I use my communication skills to tell and then show my staff what's important and that we can have this trusting relationship? So the takeaway that I thought was going to be about you need to be a charismatic leader who stands in front and shares your vision well. While I think that's still important, what's more important is the one-on-one relationship, the relationship between me and my employees, the relationship between the management team and the employees, and the fact that trust needs to be built there and it needs to be at that ground level. And that's more important to me than looking at how do I increase my non-interest income tomorrow. My day starts with how do I build more trust in my organization? And from there, we end up in a place of profit.
Let's take that to you personally just a little bit. So you manage a bank in rural Iowa. You've got agricultural customers, you've got probably the local businesses, et cetera. let's take transformational versus transactional, because I think we all understand what passive avoidance means, right? But what does that mean in your market, in your space? What types of things do you do there that make you stand out in the employee's eyes?
For me, my natural tendency is that of a transformational leader. And so that's the direction that I head naturally. What does that actually look like in our bank? That means I like to share where we're going, what I see the future. Working with the board, we have a vision for where we want to be, for where we're going. And I love to tell that story to our staff. And I love to get their buy-in and have their input adjust bits and pieces of that vision and then reshare the vision that's shared between all of us. One of the first things I did when we had our succession event took place and our entire management team changed. One of the first things we did is we sat down with all of the managers across all of our branches and said, okay, what are our actual values? What is it that we value together? And we threw out everything we had before and we started with a blank whiteboard and said, who are we? And we went through as a group and determined what our core values are. And then from there, how can we go forward while staying within the bounds of what we consider important to us? And so that collaborative effort is part of the transformational leadership. It's building this vision for the future together and then keeping things aligned with that vision. And so that's what transformational leadership is. And there's a spot for that. Transactional leadership is more your day-to-day management. And we need that as well. You can't have everybody be visionary and nobody be focused on today. And so I surround myself with different leaders in my organization. Each member of my management team has a very different leadership style. And we need that to be able to be effective.
The punchline there might be you do need both, right?
Yes.
I mean, if the correlation is a little higher from transformational to organizational trust than it is from transactional to organizational trust, a mix of those types of leaders is not a bad thing. What you don't want is the negative influence that probably comes from a passive type style.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you don't want people who are just passing the buck.
That's exactly.
We're not showing up, right? Those types.
With people who are engaged.
Excellent. Well, this has been great, Kevin. I really appreciate it. All right, so I'm thinking about what you said, which was there's probably a lot of noise in the study because it happened right after COVID, and therefore it's kind of hard to tie leadership style to your first three criteria, which were profitability, asset growth, and trust. Trust, you were able to tie those two together. But when you talk about profitability and asset growth, I wonder if it would be possible to go back to the study today and take a look at just those other two characteristics. Use what you learned and keep the study that you had, and now just take 2024 and maybe 2023 or 2022, remove the effects of COVID, and look at growth of the organizations that scored the highest, and see if removing the noise got you a better correlation. Theoretically, you could take the results and go look at and see if the correlation changed because I mean, there was a lot of noise back then, right? Between whether you call it PPP dollars. I mean, there was just all kinds of things going on. Who had the most deposits? All those things that could significantly have affected those two results.
So
right?
That's the way academia works: is you start with one study and then you take it and somebody else furthers that study by studying a different piece of it or looking at it at a different time. And I think there's definitely some possibilities of some further studies there. And I have talked to some of my peers on the academic side who have suggested doing something similar to that. I don't know that it's been 2.5 years since I finished this.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that
you got the appetite to do it
again.
Sure. No, I certainly appreciate that. I'm sure when you were in the middle of it, it was just a significant amount of time and effort just to get this done the first time. And like you said, thank God for the Iowa bankers to help you get the study out. Because I think if it came from you, you probably wouldn't got nearly the results, I'm guessing.
No, having a trusted partner like the IBA be involved really helped move the needle to complete it, which was the most important criteria I had, was that the dissertation was completed.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. This was very informational. It was a lot that I think most of our listeners can use coming out of this. So I appreciate you spending the time with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Bank Talk. Well, okay. I just wanted to thank Kevin for joining us again. Kevin officially is I believe he's got a PhD, Dr. Kevin. Next time we do one of these. But at any rate, I enjoyed his time with us, and I think sometimes you do a podcast and the answers are a little more generic. I thought the benefit of this was he was specifically trying to tie a style to a result, and I think it's just kind of a fascinating study he had done. So that's it for Bank Talk. Again, I'm Charlie Kelly, your host. Have a good day and keep on learning.
Thank you for listening to the Bank Talk podcast brought to you by Remedy Consulting. To reach out to Kevin, you can click on his LinkedIn profile in the episode description or look up Bank Plus at bankplusiowa.com. Thanks again, and we will see you in the next episode.